Sup nerds, we have another handheld video today. Last time I did show you the RS97 and I did mention that this was the last emulation handheld that I did own. And that's true. This is the last one that I had to show you, but someone that I know did send me another handheld to talk about and compare to my other handhelds just because of its form factor, and it is a more modern one. That said, they do want the handheld back, so there's that. That said, it is the Miyoo A30. The Miyoo A30, and according to him it did come like this. There was no box or anything, so that's pretty interesting. It is the third Miyoo handheld. There was the Miyoo Mini and the Miyoo Mini Plus, and then this third one is the Miyoo A30. And this handheld is relatively new. It did come out in the mid 2024, so it is a pretty recent handheld, very modern one at that. Let's open this up and check it out. But just the fact that it comes with the case, it is pretty fantastic. It is a hard case. It's very portable, as you can see. It fits in my hand, even on the case. The zipper does have this little gamepad thing, which is very cool looking. But yeah, let's open this up. And there you go. It does come with a USB-C to headphone adapter. It does come with a little manual, and it does come with a charger cable, USB-C charger cable, but I did have that out charging this in the other room. Forgot to put it back in. But yeah, here is the handheld itself. You can see that the case does have very soft inside. I mean, it's not cheap. It's very decent quality, even on the case. But even the handheld itself, it's very light because of its size, but when you hold it in your hand, it does feel like a quality handheld. It is smooth on the back. Apparently the battery has 2600 milliamps. And the person I know did send me this because they were interested in the size comparison, and I did think this was pretty cool too, because Miyoo A320, they're even similar in name, but they are very similar in size as well. If you see, boom. Practically the same dimensions. Practically the same dimensions. The screen size as well is practically the same, very similar, but as you can see, this one is more modern. Right off the bat, it does have a single analog stick. It is inside quite a bit, so the movement is slightly limited, but it feels great still. It does look like a Switch analog. Even though its movement is limited, it does feel great. There is, of course, the D-pad. Also feels pretty great compared to my other older handhelds. This one does feel like the best D-pad from the ones that I've shown in this channel. The RS97 D-pad was pretty good. It's just that it was too thin, and this one seems to be just a better version of that. But yeah, compared to the RS97, you can see that the RS97 is slightly bigger, of course, because it was bigger than the A320. The face buttons here, the 4 face buttons, are mushy, but they feel great. They are not too small. As you can see, these had pretty small buttons, pretty regressed buttons. Compared to that, this one is definitely much better than both of them. I do like the feel of both of these. Start and select are to one side. They are clicky, but not too bad. Below, we have a single micro SD slot, and the person who was using this did put a 16GB one, which of course is bigger than what I had in these, but this can emulate a lot more than these can, so 16 does feel slightly too small. On this side, there's nothing. On this side, there is a power button, which is very similar to the power button on the RS97, except on the RS97 it is on the left and this one is on the right. And above, as you can see, we do have the shoulder buttons, but also L2 and R2, which is fantastic. These two, we didn't have that. We just had L and R shoulder buttons and the tabs. This one does feel like a mixture of these two, having these two buttons and the 2 tabs added onto this, and that's what this feels like. But they're not really clicky. They're very softly clicking, I guess. They're not mushy at all, but also not that clicky either. There is also a home button here, a USB-C charger port, and the volume button. Of course, the aesthetic of it is that of a Famicom controller. They do have 2 other colors, the black one and the gray one, but I do like the look of this quite a bit. Like I said, in the back, is very smooth, there's nothing. And that's what the A320 was without the case. It was just pretty much like this. So that's really cool to see. But a lot of people say they rather took inspiration on the Game Boy Micro, but I do think that this was a nod to one of the first emulation handhelds to ever exist, just because a lot of it is very similar to it, and it definitely does make it nostalgic. Just the naming as well, A30, A320, A30, it just, everything about this does feel like a nod to the Dingu A320, which, you know, it's really rare now. You can't find a Dingu to buy very easily anymore. And so for those who do miss their Dingu A320, I do think that the Miyoo A30 is a pretty good alternative for the Dingu A320, at least form factor wise. But do the insides do it justice? Most probably yes, because it is from 2024. Now I will leave the specs over here, but as far as I know, the chipset on this is a all-winner A33, which for today it is somewhat outdated and is comparable to the Embernix XX series chipset, which uses a all-winner H700. Of course, the all-winner H700 is slightly stronger, slightly better, but you know, for this form factor, why not? The A33 is also pretty decent. So this device also has 512 megabytes of RAM, which is 4 times as much RAM as the RS97, which in turn was 4 times as much RAM as the Dingu A330. So that's an interesting coincidence, or maybe not really a coincidence, but still pretty interesting to see. So it is much better than these older stuff, but in 2025 it is still not very good, especially considering that other entry-level handhelds nowadays do tend to have at least 1 gigabyte of RAM. Like any of the Embernix XX series, they do have 1 gigabyte of RAM, and like I mentioned, a better chipset than this one. So it is not surprising that the general masses were pretty disappointed with this device when it came out at the original price range. That said, nowadays you can find it for around $30, perhaps even a little less if you find them on sale. So that low price range does make it more attractive, but in terms of performance, it will do worse than other entry-level handhelds. And compared to the old stuff, it definitely will run a whole lot more. So let's turn this on. But yeah, just a side information, the person who was using this already installed Spruce OS on this, which is a custom firmware. So we won't be able to take a look at what the stock OS was like. But according to the internet, the stock OS is terrible, so it is recommended to put a custom firmware right away to make your experience with this handheld better, and apparently Spruce OS is one of the better ones, so we'll be looking at that. Now just right off the bat you can see that the UI is very minimalistic and in that way quite modern, because if you remember with the other handhelds, they had just like a lot of stuff already out there. Here you can see that they're inside each folder, so you don't see a bunch of stuff right away, but here they are under tabs and then you can see all this stuff right away. And this aesthetic is very late 90s, early 2000s. If you remember back then, even internet sites did look sorta like this. It had a bunch of information plastered right on the homepage so that you could see everything at once. And that was the aesthetic back then. So it does kind of make sense that the Open Dingux, which was first made for this in 2009, would have such an aesthetic. Now on 2024, of course, it does have a much more modern look to it. Now on settings, there is shutdown, brightness, it goes up to 10 apparently. I put it on 7 and it seems fine. A lot of people do say that this display is not as bright as some of the other modern handhelds, but you know, for me 7 out of 10 does seem pretty fine. What does display? Luminance, hue, saturation, contrast. So right off the bat you can see there is a lot more option to adjust the display on this compared to the other two. Change language, calibrate joystick, which is fantastic. That's something we didn't see over there because none of my handhelds had a joystick. There is an improved version of the RS97 even back then that came out in 2018, 2019 that did have a little joystick knob here, kind of like the PSP. I don't have it, so I don't know if those versions did have something like calibrate joystick option. I don't think they would have it, but you know, it is on this one at least. Apps There's advanced settings for this handheld: shutdown in idle menu, shutdown idle, shutdown after sleep. So you know, it definitely does give you a lot more options for your handheld. Blue LED mode for the lights here. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, but the speakers are here. There's just one speaker there, and then there's the LED lights here. But yeah, as you can see, the blue LED mode, it's always off for me because I don't really care about that. Show battery percentage and all that. Disable joystick. Rumble intensity, so it does have rumble, which is pretty cool to see since my older handhelds didn't have any of that. There is box art scrapper right off the bat here apparently. Launch a random game, real-time clock, RetroArch, so these newer modern stuff do run RetroArch, which is pretty fantastic because it does give us more options. It's always nice to have RetroArch. Nowadays, I guess all handhelds use RetroArch. It has become sort of a standard, but you can see that even in 2017, that wasn't the case. And then you can see that there is a favorite. You can favorite games and then you'll be on the favorite tab. Nothing was registered though. And then recents will show you what you have opened before. These are, you know, so many quality of life options that they have added to these handhelds. Of course, it is not specific to these handhelds. It is something that is standard on most modern handhelds. I'm just pointing out the difference to my older handhelds that I've shown before. But yeah, if you press on games and then it will show you all the different emulators that it has for it. Arduboy, CPS2, CPS3, Dreamcast, which back in 2017, 2018, Dreamcast emulation of Dreamcast in a handheld was something that we have never even imagined, but here we are. Doom, Easy RPG, Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, Game Gear, Genesis, MSX, Neo Geo Pocket Color, Neo Geo Pocket, Nintendo 8-bits, Nintendo 64, same thing. Like the most we had dared to dream with this was a PS1, but here we are with an N64, which is crazy. Which even on computers, even on PC, emulation of N64 was always a little tricky. So to think that we have them on handhelds now, it's pretty incredible and pretty fantastic. Super Nintendo, Neo Geo, ports, Sega Master System maybe, and then a TG16, PSP, fantastic, and of course the PS1. I do think there are more emulators than this, but because there aren't a ton of ROMs in this 16GB micro SD, we don't see all the emulators. But yeah, of course we can try the obligatory Super Nintendo stuff that we have tried on all of our previous handhelds that we have had issues with on those, just to see if we have a problem here. So let's go Mega Man X3. It did run pretty well on the custom firmware of the RS97, so let's just try to see if it's as comparable. Yeah, so it runs perfectly, even better, I think, than the custom firmware on the RS97, which was really good, but playing this, it is silky smooth, 100% better, I think. And it's something that you only really notice once you do play something that is better. Like the running animation, it's so much smoother, you know? Let's try Star Fox, which we had problems in every single older handhelds that we showed. Wow, Yeah, so you definitely do see a difference there. Even on the RS97 on the custom firmware, it did seem much smoother and playable, but compared to this, it was you really can't compare. It's so much smoother on this. Let's get to the gameplay already. It is so much smoother. Yeah, so I dare say this is probably 100%. Yeah, look how smooth that looks. Yeah, so I think Super Nintendo most probably is running at 100%, or at least very, very, very close to it. But you know, I guess it has been 7 years since DRS97, 15 years since the Dingo A320. So they've had quite a bit of time to perfect the Super Nintendo emulation here. And yeah, if it can run Star Fox that way, it can most definitely play everything else at or very near that 100%. So let's take a look at some of the PlayStation ones, because that is the last thing that the RS97 could do. And let's try some of the games that we couldn't run on the RS97. The Crash Team Racing did used to stop during the load screen, and it looks like there was already a game going on. I mean, it's definitely running really well, very smoothly. Oh, there is some sound. There is some sound issues there, some frame drops on the sound. So maybe not 100% on the PlayStation. Yeah, you can definitely hear there is some issues there. I mean, it's definitely not terrible. It's frustrating that it crackles, but it's not. Yeah, look at this. Yeah, I don't know. Aside from the sound, it does seem very playable. But yeah, let's try something else. Driver also used to freeze on the loading screen. One thing that I'm noticing is that running these games, it is heating up the handheld on my hand. It's definitely heating up a lot more than RS97 and Dingo. But I guess I am trying to run heavier games. Oh, so it did get past the part where it freezes on the RS97, which is great.
Truth is, Tanner, 3 years on the department, you're still the best driver I got. We don't get too many ex-racing boys in here.
The sound doesn't seem messed up on this one.
Low-life rumble in Miami is just a hot dog.
Oh, but You can hear it on the engine sound now. I mean, there are some noticeable slowdowns. Yeah, so driver, there's a bit of a slowdown, but you know, for the most part, it works. I guess we could try Harvest Moon just to see the walking speed of it, because on the RS97, as we saw, the walking did seem a little choppy. Even though it was registering around 40 to 50 FPS, it was still pretty choppy when you're walking around. And I'm not sure if that's just how it was, or if it was the RS97 that wasn't too strong. But you can see that there was issues with the sound there. Yeah, the sound is messed up. The walking is actually pretty smooth here. Yeah, the walking is way different. It's so much better. Like, even though the sound was messed up in the beginning, and I don't think the sound was messed up on the RS97, so maybe might be something wrong with the audio for the cord that this is using, perhaps. But as far as walking animation goes, yeah, so walking around is a heck of a lot smoother than before. The sound is not like, it was just that intro that was messed up inside with the dialogue bubbles. None of it seemed to have an issue, but yeah, working pretty well, honestly. Let's try something else. Oh, there you go, select an X. So yeah, I think it will be similar for Final Fantasy. I think most of PlayStation 1 games do run fairly fine here. It's just the sound is a little messed up, but like I mentioned, that could be the core that this emulator is using. But graphically, everything seems fairly fine. With Crash Team Racing and Driver, it did heat up more than I was comfortable with, so I did have to stop a little, let it cool down before I tested the other stuff. But smaller games like Harvest Moon, Final Fantasy, they do seem to be pretty fine. So let's try N64. Of course, we could try just Mario Kart. That is the basic ROM everybody tests, I guess. And apparently there was already a save state sort of thing. Yeah, so for N64, having that analog stick really helps. It's kind of hard to look at the camera. How is Yoshi still in first place? Freaking Mario taking all my shit. Oof, pretty close. Yeah, that seems to be running perfectly. No sound issue, no graphical issue. Try to play something else. Now I do realize that we don't have enough control for games like Legend of Zelda. There's no C buttons or anything, so that could be a little tricky. But simpler games like Mario Kart, maybe even Harvest Moon, we'll try cruising. Just because those didn't run 100% back in the days on the computer, on the Project 64, so we'll see here. Oh, there was some audio issue there. No save. Yeah, so definitely audio issues there. Maybe slight frame rate drop graphically as well. What accelerates? Oh, that's not great. It's L2 that accelerates. So I need my finger in a claw position and move with the analog. That's not great at all. Yeah, so this is definitely not running great. It's going very slow. The sound is completely messed up as well. I think the frame rate is getting better. It might be like one of those cases where once you have it playing for a little bit, it does get better. Maybe like something to do with shaders. Maybe something to do with them trying to load shaders and whatnot. Maybe, I don't know. But it's definitely going. The frame rate is definitely better than when I first started this. Like you can see, I can dodge things pretty fast. Yeah, frame rate wise, I think it's now at almost normal. It's just the sound that's messed up. This sounds horrendous though. Maybe it'd be better to just play muted. But look at this, look at the way the car moves. Definitely not bad at all. Okay, once I got off the road, it did get a little awkward there. But definitely playable. If you mute it, maybe. Not too bad, to be honest. Like I mentioned, games like this is making this heat up quite a bit. Yeah, I'm not sure how to feel about that. But yeah, N64 was always harder to emulate than PS1. Of course, some games will run better than others. Some games will be much worse than others. But you know, there seemed to be no issues with Mario Kart, and Cruising the World graphically was slow at start, fairly okay. It's just the sound that was messed up. Oh, it's already playing. And this is not bad at all. I remember Paper Mario was one of the ones that had issues on Project 64 way back in the days. But this isn't bad at all. Yeah, frame rate rise. This is pretty good. Wow, this is actually running pretty great. Let's try some Dreamcast. Why not Gauntlet Legends? Oh, oops. Sound is a little iffy. There's some graphical issues on the bridge. On the stairs as well, I guess. Yeah, playable, but definitely there's some graphical issues, some sound issues in the beginning. And it's understandable because, you know, Dreamcast is the one that was harder to emulate out of the three. PS1, N64, and Dreamcast. Dreamcast was harder to emulate. So yeah, that does make sense. It is pretty hot right now.
It's party time. Let's have some fun. All right, let's go make some crazy money. Go ahead and pick a cook action. All right, let's get it on. Hey, it's time to make some cook.
Yeah, so graphically it did okay. So yeah, it does run the three big ones, the Dreamcast, the N64, and the PS1. It does run them all okay. And there are some sound bugs on the Dreamcast and the Nintendo 64, but for the most part, graphically they do seem to be working fairly fine. Like I said, it does heat up quite a bit though. Yeah, so it is running on performance overclock. Yeah, no wonder it was running pretty well. But yeah, that explains why it was heating up, because it is overclocked. It is running on overclock. So I assume anything that you put in here, of course it will depend on the game. Just like on Nintendo 64, Cruisin' wasn't working too well, but then the two Mario games that I tried were working completely fine. PSP perhaps won't be too great on here because it is too small. I guess we can try it, but I will let this cool off for a second before I try it.
2,000 years later.
So you can see with PSP there is like a bezel here, up and below. It runs okay, but again, the sound is, every console I've tried, the sound has been not so great. It does seem to play okay. I'm just really trash at it. Mega Man is no problem to have the screen so squished, I guess. But for RPGs where you need to read, I assume this small screen making it even smaller will be not so great. But just the fact that it can run PSP games, it's fantastic to me. With what seems like no frame rate issue either. So that's pretty amazing to me. Because again, I come from RS97. This is fantastic, the little thing. And such a small handheld too. Look at that. It looks fantastic. I mean, that wasn't too small actually. It's okay, it feels okay. The bezels do make it seem like it's smaller, like more cramped, but I could read that fine. Can I not pet? Can I not pet the dog? Yeah, it seems to run pretty smoothly. I mean, I guess this is not a very demanding game. The sound seems okay. In one of the first games that I tried, the sound isn't bugged up. So yeah, this is fantastic, and the letters aren't too small either. I think it's pretty great. Like here, items and tools, I can definitely read them right on there. It's not too small. It's fantastic. Another thing that I thought was pretty interesting is that this has ports in it. Like when I checked, there was only the 2048 Dino Jump and then nothing else. And then I tried to add some ports in here that I found. I really wanted this Cannonball, which was the racing game, but I couldn't get it to work. The other ports don't really interest me. Jazz Jackrabbits from DOS. This was one of the first games that I ever played in my life. But then looking through the ports, there was two games that caught my attention, which was the Streets of Rage remake and Sonic Mania. And Sonic Mania, I did have to put my own game files in there from Steam to make it work, but it does work and it's fantastic because it is a pretty new game, right? Even though it's just a Sonic game, if you see like the intro animation, it is so smooth because it is a port. Look at the way Sonic moves. That is so smooth. And that just feels fantastic to me that we can run something like this on a tiny little handheld. Now, of course, the ports here are not like in Portmaster where there is a ton of cool games, you know. On the Miyoo A30, it is very limited to what you can play. It is even more limited than the Miyoo Mini ports, because over there they do have other OSs that have more ported games like Diablo and whatnot. But here for the Miyoo A30, I couldn't find Diablo, I couldn't find a lot of the things. But at least we have Sonic Mania. And then gameplay wise, it is just another Sonic game. This might get me some hate, but I never really enjoyed Sonic all of the games seem very similar to one another. It just all kind of blends in. But because it is just a Sonic game, it does run really smoothly, works great. Just that the animation and stuff are improved and it looks better, sounds better. It's a pretty great port, and people might prefer a Sonic game on the emulators for whatever reason, but for me, a non-Sonic fan, this one looks really great to play on a little handheld. And then of course there's Streets of Rage. It feels a little blurry on my camera, but you know, it's actually not blurry at all. I don't know why it looks blurry on my camera. Yeah, so Streets of Rage does run great, does sound great too. It's just just a nice beat 'em up game. Yeah, so it plays great, it runs great, sounds great, but you know, it's not a very demanding game at all, so it makes sense. But yeah, I do think this is a great handheld for its price too. It's only around 30 bucks, but it runs so much. It's a lot of fun time for 30 bucks. So for those quote higher end consoles that this handheld can handle, it will be either a hit or a miss. It would depend heavily on the game that you're trying to play on it, but I assume up until that part, until then, everything else will work fine. Even Super Nintendo with special chip was working fine. Now the issue with the heating and this having less RAM than the other entry-level handhelds and it having a weaker chipset than the Anbernic XX series, it does explain why it wasn't so popular. But like I said, because it wasn't so popular, this can easily be found being sold online on AliExpress and places like that for around $30, $35. If it's on sale, it will be less than that. So at that price range, I definitely think is very interesting. It's a very attractive option, especially if you are someone like me who only had the older emulation handhelds. Then if you do want something with a form factor of the old Dingo A320, then like I showed you, the Miyoo A30 is definitely a very good option since they are very similar thickness and size. The little analog does add quite a bit to the experience. I did like it quite a bit. Being able to play some of the N64 games because of the analog does make it a lot better, because it is quite impossible to play N64 on a control layout like this. Having L2, R2 and the analog did help quite a bit with that. And honestly, because it was inset, I thought it wasn't gonna be as good as it is, but it did surprise me quite a bit. And it definitely shows how far emulation handhelds have come. This is considered weaker than most entry-level handhelds nowadays, and it's still running all those consoles that with the stuff that I'm used to, we couldn't even dream of running. That said, for those harder to emulate consoles, the screen does seem a little small, but you know, like I showed you, it is definitely playable. So I guess if you just want to emulate from PS1 and older stuff and you don't want to spend too much, then this is definitely the handheld to get. The performance to price point, definitely, this is very attractive. Very nice. But if you do want a main handheld to play those heavier stuff, maybe look into a different handheld that might not heat up as much as this, that won't be as small as this, and that has a stronger chipset and more RAM. And yeah, playing around with this definitely has made me want to have some of these more modern emulation handhelds of my own. Like I said, this was provided to me by someone that I know, and I do have to give it back. Maybe I'll look into getting something for myself. Not sure when that will be. My YouTube views have been going down quite a bit. It's not helping me out as much as I would have liked. But you know, it is what it is. Playing these heavier consoles on this thing has made me wonder what it would feel like to play, you know, even heavier consoles on a handheld like GameCube and PS2. I know that Android devices nowadays can run those really well. So, you know, that would be fantastic to try one day. I know these handheld videos on my channel don't get a lot of views at all, but if by any chance, if Ambernic or Retroid or any companies out there that they make these handhelds, if you are watching this and you would like to provide me with some of your handhelds for me to play around with, that would be fantastic. I know it's a long shot, but hey, it is what it is. And that is what I had to show and tell, guys. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider helping the channel out by clicking on the join down below. It would help out a lot. Like I mentioned, my views are going down quite a bit, so you know, any help would be appreciated. Subscribe to see more videos like this and of other collection videos that I make. And as always nerd on.